Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike T. Nelson. On this podcast, we talk about all things to increase your performance, add muscle, and also improve body composition, all without destroying your health within a flexible framework. Today on the podcast, my good buddy, Dr. Dylan Seeley, and we are talking about a whole wide range of everything related to performance, a little bit more on the neurology side. We start off talking about working with mixed martial arts fighters, visual training in sports, visual processing also. We even get in a little bit of drills you can do for the visual system, potentially considering microdosing for training techniques, automatic nervous system testing, HRV, and a whole wide range of other awesome stuff. Even touch a little bit on concussion. I first met Dr. Dylan, I think it might have been, I can't remember if it was through one of Coach Kavanaugh's things or if it was at a Carrig event or somewhere else. But we had wonderful chats about all things neurology and just sports performance in general, and he is a wealth of knowledge, and it was awesome to have him on the podcast here. Make sure to check out his website, which we'll link to down below, which is inferno-pr.com. All the great stuff he has on Instagram. He's currently in the Columbus, Ohio area, although I know he does a fair amount of traveling. So if you are anywhere in the Columbus, Ohio area, and you have the ability to see him in person, I would definitely recommend it. And now as I'm thinking back, I think I might have met him in person the first time at Allie Gilbert's Silverback Summit, I think. But anyway, it's all kind of a blur. But I think you'll enjoy the podcast with him today if you like all things sports performance and are looking at it from a slightly different angle. And we got sponsors today. If you want more electrolytes to help with your performance, check out our friends over at Element. They are my favorite electrolyte by far. I had 2 packets today. I had the lemon lime and the raspberry. And I always bring them with when we travel. We're recently in Mexico, so I brought a whole bunch down there while we were spending our time there in the heat. So I have a link down below. And also check out our friends over at Tecton Ketones. Shout out to them. I am an ambassador and an advisor to them. And they're working on some pretty big things coming out this spring. I can't say what they are yet, but I think you will really enjoy it in the process of reworking a whole bunch of stuff to match. But in the meantime, if you're looking for ketone esters that taste pretty darn good, make sure to check them out. Use the code Dr. Mike to save 15%. What's cool about the ketone esters is they can get your blood levels of ketones much higher than the salts, and you have way less risk of any GI disturbance when you do that. Currently, each can has about 10 grams of the BHB molecule that is bonded to glycerol. That allows it to get into your circulation quite quickly, and you can raise your blood levels quite high. So check them out there. And as always, you want to get on my newsletter, you can go to the link below. And we also have a special Flex 4 in this edition. So for the people on the newsletter, or if you want to hop on and get this one, I asked Dr. Dylan what would be his top 4 things people should check into once they're pretty good with the basics. They're good at sleep, pretty good at nutrition, pretty good at training. What would be the next 4 areas based on his significant experience that he would recommend them to look into? So if you're a coach or someone at advanced level, and you want to look into what are the top things you can add to your repertoire, check out that question. That is in the Flex 4. We'll put a link to it down below. It does put you on to the daily email list also. If you're on the insider email list already, you will automatically get this one delivered directly to you, and you'll get all the past Flex 4 questions too that only go out to the newsletter. So check that out below and enjoy this conversation. My buddy, Dr. Dylan Seeley. What's going on, Doc? How are you?
Not too bad, man. How you been?
Good. It was nice to see you again in Virginia last time we were out there. Yeah, that was pretty fun. Good to see you
Yeah,
again.
that's awesome to connect again, man.
Yeah. And today we wanted to talk about the kind of lesser known things for human performance. We were just talking before we started recording that my prediction is I think visual training will become popular again at the later part of this year, maybe into next year. And my fear is it'll go the same way the last time I saw this trend, which was probably 12, 15 years ago. Intention, good ideas, horrible execution, in my opinion. And the assumption was, eh, we can only make people better. We can't really make anyone for worse. We can't really f someone up with visual training. And I would say maybe if you're dealing with really high level people, maybe on a good day, if I'm feeling incredibly optimistic, I might give that to you. But as you start going down the ladder and you start finding people with visual issues, vestibular issues, and other issues, you can, as my buddy Jeremy Schmo has said, you can definitely have someone turn into a melted candle like right in front of you.
I've had that
And that's
before.
not going to be good if you don't have the skill set to know how to get them out of being a melted candle by the time they leave.
Yeah, exactly. I think of it akin to the breathing kick that probably happens 10
Yep.
plus years ago when people were first getting into it. And then I think there was a video, I think it was the UFC video game, or it was some video game where like it dealt with fighters. And one of the things was you could train, it was like a little side thing on it, but you would essentially, your fighter would go for a run and only use like a snorkel mask.
Oh yeah, I remember all the snorkel the altitude
Yeah,
masks and
and
all the
the
restricted
Yahtzee
breathing
mask.
and
Yeah, so that made it its way into the video games, and we realized it's probably not doing much of what we thought it was doing. And yeah, I think it's circling back around to the vision realm of things, where everyone's becoming a little bit more familiar with the pencil push-ups, and people are just running with that, not realizing that's the final product of things. It's not usually something you just start off with off the bat.
yeah, and the snorkel training was funny because God, you saw all sorts of top UFC fighters doing this, and I remember seeing these videos. And if you don't even know anything about training, and yes, there is some aspects of training that look crazy that actually potentially work. I would put Cal Dietz's goat drill in that
Mhm.
area. Looks batshit crazy, but it actually works pretty good. Anyone would look at snorkel training and would be like, this is the dumbest thing we've ever seen. And they're pretty close. And it was even worse because the marketing didn't even match any physiology. The
Yeah.
marketing was, you can train at altitude. And I'm like, okay, I may not know a lot of stuff, but one of the things I know is that altitude has a pressure difference. Like, how the fuck is this thing making a pressure difference? And you found out later was just, oh, it's just restricting breathing. Oh, okay. At least say that, and maybe there might be some use for it. But yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, I saw that. That was a massive thing. What was that, 10 plus years ago when that was really cracking into the market? Thankfully, it's died out along the way. And I don't have to deal with as many stupid questions from the athletes that I work with about it.
Yeah, I think from every potential UFC person I worked with at that point, the first question was not, what do you do for training? What do you do for nutrition, etc.? How can you help me? It's, hey, I want to do this. Insert crazy ass video of whoever running down the street with a snorkel duct taped to their mouth. Like, how do I do it? And I'm like, just don't. Like, just.
I've got an auto reply set up on my Instagram because my fighters will send me just the dumbest shit on videos. What do you think about this? Should we throw this into training next week? And I just had the auto reply, please don't send me this stupid shit again.
Yeah, here's my answer. No. So let's start with visual training. Like why my first question is if someone is at a very high level in a sport that requires integration of vision, vestibular, proprioception stuff, like I'm thinking of receivers in football, even a lot of defensive people in the NFL. One, are you going to really find many hardcore deficits? And then as you go down the line, like what are things that you look for? Because my premise is at the highest level, there's things they can probably work on and get better in terms of skills and integration, but you're not going to find a lot of just flat out what I would say is defects. For example, I don't see in 3D. There's not a chance in hell I'm going to make it to a sport where I have to catch a ball real fast. I worked on a guy who was a top in the NHL for a while at deflecting pucks midair into the net. We tried for 20 minutes, I think I was telling you the story, to find any weird stuff in his visual system. We found one error that he unconsciously corrected for on the second rep already. That guy's visual system is pretty solid, unable to do that. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. What I find is with a lot of athletes, they're already at a high level and they're there for a reason. Like they're just genetically built different to be able to handle things. You might find some small deficits here and there, and that makes a big difference in the grand scheme of things because we
Oh,
always think
totally.
of something as just if it's 1% better or 0.5% better. Average person, is that statistically meaningful? Maybe not. For a pro athlete, that's the difference between another million on your contract versus not getting renewed the next year. We're trying to take those small wins as much as we can. But yeah, similar to what you find, it's very small stuff. Their eyes are functioning pretty well. It just might be a subtle thing where this eye is just tracking in a split second later than it should be, which kind of distorts where our visual field is at. Or it might be that they're have a deficit in regards to, say, the color green in their peripheral vision. All right.
Yeah.
So
I
for
found there's more color differences than anything else
yeah,
in my limited testing. If I were to pick one thing.
that's what I've noticed too. Yeah, because I've tested that a handful of times with some of the athletes, and I might have a guy that doesn't pick up the color green or color blue or whatever it might be. So then, like for example, for the hockey guys, if you got a big body in front of the net and all their job is to deflect the puck in, but they can't sense that someone is on their side because they can't see that color coming into their periphery as easily as it should be. Like they're going to get knocked out of the frame when they go to put their stick up. They're going to get bodied. So it's really important to make sure these little things just get cleaned up along the way. Now, as you work your way down, that's when the visual impairments become more and more apparent. All right. People tend to weed themselves out of sports that they're not naturally
Yeah.
good at. So if you've already got visual issues, you're probably not playing a hand-eye coordination sport.
No.
So it tends to make my job a little bit easier because people at least have some capabilities of getting into it early on. But yeah, even just small stuff like visual processing, making sure like we're seeing the image clearly, making sure we can see it in 3D, like you've been talking about, all these things makes a big difference because a lot of times we think if we just get the athlete bigger, faster, stronger, they're going to get better, say on the ice. If that athlete, there's a visual delay or there's a processing delay in decision making, they're just going to be a bigger, faster, stronger problem once they get to the puck because they still haven't processed that information or what to do with it. So they're just going to get there faster. So their screw ups are going to become way more prominent now, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's what I think you see in some older athletes, especially I'm thinking NFL, NHL, that like raw power and speed, they're definitely not the top on the team. They might even be lower bottom, but yet their performance on the field, if you were to grade them, is still really high. They just
Mhm.
always seem to be in the right spot at the right time. I think a lot of that just goes back to that visual vestibular and that cognitive processing prediction. Like they've seen the plays so many times, they have that half a second or whatever to move where the play is going to happen because they've seen it so many times versus just being purely reactive. I don't know if you've seen something similar.
Yep. I always tell the guys that I work with, be a PhD in your sport and not in the weight room. It doesn't matter if you're getting, it helps to be bigger, faster, and stronger. But if
Oh,
you're pretty
definitely.
sharp between the eyes, like we've watched enough film, we know how to read a pattern, we know where we need to be. You just become more efficient overall. Like if you look at all the top athletes, doesn't matter what sport, their testing numbers aren't always the best. Like they're in that middle pack, like you talked about, but they're just so efficient and have such a high level of understanding in the game that there's no wasted movement. Who cares if they don't have the highest VO2 max because they're probably not going to expend as much energy because they're going to be in the right place at the right time. Right. Same thing. Do they need to be the fastest person to get to the ball? Like it can help, yeah. But if they already know where that puck's going to go to after it deflects off the board, it no longer becomes like a pure foot race. They already know where it's going to be at, so they can just get to that spot right away rather than taking a poor angle and then trying to play catch up.
Yeah, I just think of if you watch film, like just the reaction, the not getting taken in by like misdirection, right? So if in the NFL, if they're running a reverse or they're running a play where the quarterback, everybody is shifted all to the left, even though the play is designed to go to the right, you'll see them not get taken in going with the flow, right? You'll see them, okay, just wait and then react back the other way. So in the Vikings, I think of like Andrew Van Ginkel, who very physical person, definitely has a lot of the physical capability, but everyone who's interacted with him says that his ability to know the game and to know the plays and to know where it's going. And if you watch film of him, you'll see him almost delay and then end up in the exact right spot. And if you watch it full speed, you're like, oh my God, that guy's so fast. But if you look carefully, it's that efficiency. Like you see this, like you mentioned, the NHL too. Pucks are reflecting off. You'll see the person go directly to where that puck was going to be, not even break stride and just run with it versus someone who maybe overshot a little bit and now has to correct to get back to it.
Exactly. Like this is really prominent in jiu-jitsu, but
Yes.
you ever watch like a white belt roll with a higher level belt, like they don't know how to connect their moves yet. And so they'll get to one spot really fast, spaz out, and then they get there and they go, shit, I don't know what to do to the next thing.
Yeah.
So they don't know how to link things together. So like luckily my buddy Vitor is one of the best in the world at what he does with jiu-jitsu. And he always tells me slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't rush to get to one spot or the other. Slowly connect these parts. And if you connect these things in a fluid transition, they're going to look pretty damn fast.
Yeah. And that all the way across sports from watching athletes on film or on tape, you're like, okay, yeah, that looks pretty doable. And then when you see a 340-pound human run that fast in person, it's another level. There's something about seeing high speed large mammals moving in person that is just mind blowing in my experience.
Oh, it's terrifying. I've seen it. I've seen it plenty of times firsthand. Yeah, it's pretty cool to watch. Yeah, especially like it's most prominent in football because those guys are just built for speed, and it's terrifying to watch. What was it? I'm probably gonna butcher the name. I think it was Dontari Poe ran like a 4.47 maybe as a
Yeah,
lineman
yeah,
combine a few years back. That was just terrifying. But I think it was
yeah,
faster than 7 maybe.
yeah. But all of them, you see that it surprisingly still looks pretty smooth. If you
Mm.
look at the higher upper echelon versus medium, you can tell it just looks a little clunky. And you see this across even, I think of just rowing, an erg like you're on in your garage, like a concept too. Like you watch like an elite person break a world record on a 2K, and at the end, you're like, huh, that still looks pretty damn smooth. Like I couldn't tell the last 10 seconds from like the middle 10 seconds from almost maybe the first 10 seconds. Because I remember the first time I watched video of that, and then I watched my video of it, and I'm like, oh my God, I turned into a spaz monkey like halfway through, and it was a disaster looking thing. But you don't notice it at the time because you're in your head. I'm just thinking, if I just try harder, it'll solve everything. And no, trying harder very rarely solves anything.
What makes an athlete truly elite as compared to an amateur is their ability to relax. Well, athletes will relax at a much faster rate than, anybody else. So it's not really trying to muscle it and stay tight. It's just creating a slow, smooth rhythm, which then appears to be very fast. So if you can stay in this even keel rhythm, you're going to get that relaxation down pat. So that's a big thing that I focus on with training my guys is instilling rhythm back into what they do. No longer just muscling where we need to be.
Yeah, and on a side note, you mentioned jujitsu. I was having a discussion with this with my tattoo guy the other day. What are your thoughts about jujitsu people? Do they generally roll with their eyes open or closed? And what are your thoughts about that? This was our discussion for a couple hours.
I would say, ooh, that's a kind of a good one. There's some spots where it's really just feel like they're not even looking, they can just know
Right.
they're going to be at. I think there's still a bit of eyes open into the spot, but it's not so much like necessarily looking at your opponent as it is looking towards your coach and what they're trying to tell you. It's the same thing within MMA. I work with MMA a lot more than the jiu-jitsu guys. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's just keeping like eye contact on your coach to see what they're telling you, or like just eye contact around to see if you can set up a move, like maybe looking where their feet are at or something else like that. But a lot of it is just proprioceptive work. They just know where you're at. They can feel your body pressure, and then they can know like how to set up a sweep depending upon where your body pressure is at.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth because on one hand, you could argue because you're physically interacting with the other person, eh, visual field probably not going to buy you a whole lot of information because you can feel where they're at. You're literally in contact with them. So it's mainly 100% proprioception. But then my brain goes to, like you were saying, Could you look at the coach? Could you look at not all positions, but tension on their face? What are they doing with non-contacting limbs? Like, my thought is if you could get to the highest level possible would be the proprioceptive component would almost be more unconscious, and you could still use your eyes to try to pick up other cues that you may not necessarily get proprioceptively only, even though I get that the sport is, primarily you're just, have contact with another human.
Yeah, I find a lot of it also comes down to what's your style. Like if you're
Yes.
someone who's going to pull guard, very quickly, like I find that their visual processing is not as great or the visual skills aren't as great as opposed to a wrestler, like who's picking up on cues because they're looking to level change, they're looking to catch someone off guard. So it's just subtle differences. But honestly, the jiu-jitsu guys, because I'll do just like a really simple single eye search and just like scan drill with people, like I essentially have a piece of paper and it's got a bunch of numbers around it, and then it's got my logo in the background that's like on a grayscale.
Mm.
And what I'm looking at is obviously if it's a black number against the white background of the paper, it's really easy to pick up. But then it gets a little bit tougher when some of the numbers are over top the gray or they're half on the gray, half on the white. So we'll do single eye search and then see like how well they go through that. My athletes that are in striking sports, so like the boxers, the Thai fighters, they are phenomenal at this stuff. My
Oh, I
jiu-jitsu
bet.
guys, not so
Not
much.
so good, yeah.
Yeah, it's just because they don't have to rely upon it because they're not looking for these little subtleties of someone reaching out with an arm or whatever. Because honestly, within jiu-jitsu, technique is extremely important. But when you look at it from a training standpoint, you're really looking at isometric strength and maximal strength. Because it helps to be fast, but it's not like a key old thing in the sport. Whereas once you get into striking-based sports, velocity-based training reigns a little bit more supreme within that.
Yeah, and the handful of people I worked with at a, lower to maybe at best intermediate level, the lower level the person is, the more they gravitated towards wrestling, jujitsu, weight training. In the back of my head, I'm thinking, I wonder if they have some eye issues because everything, and I'll ask them like, hey, did you like playing ball sports when you grew up? No, hated it. Do you ever play tennis, pickleball, or anything? No. Can you juggle? No. What do you spend your whole free time doing? Bro, I lift weights and do jujitsu. Okay. In my head, I'm thinking, I wonder if you have some visual issues because you've gravitated towards sports and things where you're proprioceptive, so it doesn't matter so much visually what you're doing. You're gravitating towards the thing that you're better at, which is just hyper proprioceptive work.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I find a lot of the time. Mostly I just see the split between striking. So whether it's like Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu guys, or if it's just the grappling guys. Now, what's really interesting is the MMA because you're gonna have to do both. So you kind
Yeah.
of have a good assessment and to see where somebody is at. Like I have a handful of guys where we've tested them and their visual work sucks, but they also tend to be very good grapplers though.
Yeah,
And then I got other
shocker.
guys who like to and they're phenomenal strikers and can pick people apart on their feet because their vision is just so crisp.
Yeah, in that case then is it because I would imagine that's a key differentiator, right? I don't know what they would typically do for training, but to me, that makes 100% sense. You have a guy who's at a high level that say they're in the UFC. They're not quite upper echelon. They're just entered and they're notoriously for once they get you on the ground, they're really good. I can think of some names of people and I know they're trainers, so I won't say their names. But striking wise, yeah, not so good. They're a little bit hit or miss. So my assumption is that you'd be looking at maybe target stuff like specific visual stuff with that athlete because obviously they've shown that they have the skill set, they probably have pretty good muscle, they probably have pretty decent power, like they're probably pretty good at I think most of the things that most people would be training. And again, I'm not saying not train those, but I think you'd be then correct looking at visual and integration issues or things you could work on to improve their striking game, correct?
Yeah, I think that makes a massive difference. I also think like what weight class they're in also plays a pretty big role.
Sure.
I mean, the heavier you get, greater chances of knockouts just because
Yep.
guys are a lot bigger. So you tend to see a lot more guys who are just going to stand up and bang, like they're just going to sneakers at each other. You see that way more in the heavyweight division than you do, or light heavy, than you would to say a flyweight or something like that. Whereas grappling is key within those divisions. I think like Sean O'Malley was the exception to that rule
Yeah.
until he got up against again, someone who had like just decent striking, but really good grappling, and then that was all it took. Yeah, I think it really depends upon weight classes. And then I think as well, like with the visual stuff, yeah, we can train it up a whole bunch. But I had this conversation the other day with he had just retired out of UFC, but he was we were going back and forth on should you really train up your weaknesses or should you just bury yourself
Mm,
further into your strengths? And he was of the school of thought like it'll be 80-20 or 90-10 focusing on your strengths rather than trying to bring up your weaknesses. And I found that kind of interesting because within mixed martial arts, it is mixed martial arts. You got to be good at everything that you do, but it's really hard to be good at every single thing. And if you chase all these qualities, you're going to be average at all of them, right? It's like CrossFit,
yeah.
right? You're good at everything, not great at anything. Yeah, so it's that same thing. And you're seeing the guys who are just really good at one thing are the ones that are winning the divisions.
Yeah. Yeah. My thought is maybe you could do some type of visual screen, some basic, I don't want to say basic, but easier work that's not super taxing because there is a cost to everything. And I'm sure you've probably seen this too, where I could do some visual vestibular work with a couple athletes and, it's pretty good. Like, we could still probably train after. Everything's pretty good. A few other people, if I do the wrong thing, they just look like I pulled the string out of their back and the rest of their training session is half
Yeah,
for that day.
absolutely. Because usually we'll throw it in the afternoon because they'll have a morning session and an evening session. So it could be like, so Tuesday, Thursdays, they do weights and cardio with me in the morning. And then they have evening sessions that they do, whether it's MMA practice or Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu. And so what we'll do is we'll try and stack it up on days where they only have one session,
Nice.
whether it's a morning or a night, preferably a morning thing, because then they can just fry their brain in the afternoon and be done with it. So I find that tends to help a whole bunch. Yeah, because like you said, there is a cost that comes with it. You put the guys through it and you can tell their brains fried after doing just 5-10 minutes of work on it. Because it is very
Yeah.
taxing, it is very hard. And especially all the different domains that you're trying to chase within it. Whether you're looking at like dynamic or static visual acuity, looking at contrast sensitivity, all of these things, and then you get into convergence or divergence work, stereopsis, so like depth perception going into that, and you can really go down the rabbit hole on each thing and really work somebody hard, but then they're absolutely cooked, like you said, the rest of the day. So it's just giving them enough to where they get a little bit of enjoyment, get the benefit out of it, but then not enough to where they get really good at it, if that makes sense. Because that's it helps, but it's not the main focus.
Yeah, you're not, there's no visual Olympics per se.
Man, I'd be crushing it.
Yeah. You're looking for transfer. And I think that was a part that when I first started doing this stuff, I was very underappreciated. I think probably still is. So I did some training originally through the Z Health system, is how I was exposed to it through Dr. Cobb, and eventually went on, did their master trainer, and did a bunch of work later on through the Carrick Institute. But I remember the sports vision course the first time I was there, and everyone in the class was like coming up and testing my eyes, going, "Holy shit, look at these guys' eyes. This is crazy. Hey, can we test your eyes?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, fine, whatever." Like I show up on day two, more visual testing. I remember at lunch, going to get lunch, I got a coffee that was like a liter tall, drank the whole thing, and I could have taken a nap in the back of the class. I was completely, utterly worthless the rest of the day. It felt like I got hit by a semi truck of like air quote CNS fatigue. Like my joints felt fine, movement was a mess. Everything just felt like my brain got just absolutely fried. And if you were to watch it from the outside, all it looked like was, a lot of convergence stuff, a lot of it doesn't, if you don't know anything, it doesn't look like you did anything. It just looks like, why would you be tired from moving your eyes around? But in certain circumstances, especially if you have a lot of heavy compensations, it's hard to understate how incredibly fatiguing that can actually be, even though it doesn't look like it at all.
Oh yeah, it makes such a big difference on that. I had the same actual experience because when I was doing the concussion course with Carrick and Dr. Antonucci, like
Yeah.
was use some of the stuff because I had failed. I had 6 concussions throughout my playing career. So I was the perfect case study. So yeah, so like literally every test that we did, I think I failed it. But yeah, we were going through some of the vision stuff and we were doing Maddox rods, like testing for
hmm
like ESO and EXO and all this stuff. And we're sitting there and they're like, the line should be either like vertical or horizontal. And I'm like, every single one I have is diagonal. And he's like, oh. So we went through all
Which on
this.
that test is a pretty big issue.
Yeah. So, and so, yeah, you got some issues going on here. So then they were just teasing some things out. And it was just super interesting because everything's just so tightly connected between your ears, your eyes, your neck, all these things. And we tried to do a bunch of drills to fix some stuff up. And I came in the next day and I was cooked. I didn't even, usually I would at least go out and get some food and hang out with everybody for a little bit after the course. I think I like went straight home and then or I went straight to the hotel and I think I was in bed by 7:30. So yeah, I was absolutely cooked. So yeah, there is a cost that comes to a lot of this stuff. So it's just giving small doses. That's the other thing I'll do is microdose it too. So they
Hmm.
just might have one drill that we do for the day, but they might have it 7 days a week. So I'm a big fan of that when it comes to training their vision. Because same thing with vestibular work, you're better off undershooting it, but doing it extremely frequently rather than doing just one big go and then not touching it again for the rest of the day or for the week. And it's because as you train that up, as say like we're doing a little bit of vestibular work, we do a little bit of vestibular work, we get that hypofunctioning thing back to an even state with the other side, but then you don't do anything the rest of the day. It's just going to down regulate itself. And now you're back to having a hypo and hyper issue, like this mismatch. So I tell my athletes, we're going to do this one drill. You're going to do it for like a set of 10 reps, and then you're going to do it again in 2 hours. And then you're going to do it again in 2 hours. And we're just going to keep doing that until you go to bed. And we might do that for a few days, and then things start to equal out. Because I made that mistake early on because I didn't put it in the directions in Coach Catalyst when I was coaching one of my athletes. I'm like, you have 10
Mm.
sets of this. And then he did 10 sets at once. And I was like,
Oh.
shit. Thankfully, it was preseason for him. This was for one of my rugby guys. But yeah, so we learned that mistake real quick. So I made sure we didn't do that again. But yeah, just hitting it more frequently throughout the day. Same thing with visual stuff. If I can give slight visual inputs throughout the day, that makes it way easier and you adapt way better than, say, doing it a different way.
Yeah, that's what I found too is I'll do muscle testing or range of motion testing or whatever. And you'll find when you find a couple of those key drills, it's like, ooh, everything feels better. Like a lot of times athletes will report, okay, things look better, feel better. And then I've made that mistake too in the past where I'm like, oh, this is the thing. And then you take the big hammer and you whack them like 20 times with it and they
Yeah.
just degrade into a puddle in front of you.
I,
Oops, went a little too far there. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, and it applies across so many different domains, whether it's just visual or vestibular or even training. Like I use that for my rehab, honestly. Like,
Yeah, same idea.
yeah, we don't just do one big session. I give people like a total time. Say if I'm doing like a foam roller hamstring bridge, I'll give them a total time for the day that they have to do. So they might have 120 seconds worth of work, but they can chop that up however they like. And usually they're doing that 4 to 5 times a day to get that 120, and we get much better results than if they just did it that one time.
Yeah, that's the argument for some strength training stuff, even maybe some velocity based training. Hell, I could make that argument about dietary protein. Like just get most of your protein in, and then we'll worry about distribution and moving it around. And what you realize is if you had to eat 180 grams of protein, oh, shocker, I probably have to distribute this in order to get that much down. I'm not going to eat 180 grams at one sitting. So it's like the same ideas apply across multiple domains too.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I found. So the more that I've implemented that, the better and the faster we've gotten results.
And then with that, and then after this, we'll back up to talk about some of the visual stuff and what people can do for testing and everything. But how do you integrate it into their movements? Or do you find that if you find the right things, the brain will just accept it? So what I've thought is your brain and your body always wants to be more efficient. So it's always trying to find the most efficient pathway. It's just if we're looking at breathing compensations, eye stuff, visual stuff, you may have some things that need to be fixed, but for that person's brain, that path they're currently going down is the most efficient for them. So how I'm thinking
Yeah.
about this is that I need to make another better path more efficient. And when I've done that for breathing mechanics, visual stuff, vestibular stuff, it appears like the brain wants to go down that direction. And then it's just getting a little bit more of that frequency embedded so that it becomes normal. But to me, it was fascinating that even doing hands-on stuff, like all of a sudden you'll hit one or two drills and you'll see, oh wow, all of a sudden now they're getting air into their upper lobes of their lung, or their ribs are laterally expanding. That I never coached them to do that per se, that the brain figured out, oh, now I have this capability. This way is more efficient. So I'm going to almost subconsciously go that direction.
In regards to incorporating it into weight room or anything else, I'll usually embed it into the warm up with a lot of the stuff that we do.
Yep.
I find if we can get them to, so the more parasympathetic they are, like the greater the visual field because there's no stress. As we get more sympathetic, like it'll start to narrow down. So I make sure like early on, like we'll open up with some breathing drills and do some easier things just to get a baseline for where they're at today. And then what we'll do from there is we'll start incorporating it into, say, you could use a figure eight walk. I'm really big on targeting things like on a Swiss ball. So we'll lay, or a
Mm.
physio ball. So we'll lay on our back on the ball and then we'll drop what, like say they have a right posterior canal deficit. So we'll drop back into the right and then give them a visual thing to look at too. It could just be a kettlebell laying back into the right. And so they have to look at it and then do a sit up and come back to center and look at me. So we're getting like the eyes out to the periphery. We're getting that dropping the head and ear to the side to get into that right posterior canal. And then we go back and then we'll just feed that. So that's a really easy warm up. Plus a little bit of core work gets thrown into that too. I find it falls apart with higher threshold movements
Yeah.
because we're at that point, we're really just chasing the strength adaptation. And yes, we could have them put their head in a certain position and do a lift, but it defeats the point of what we're trying to train that day. So if I'm really just trying to get them to strength train, I'd rather just push it hard doing it in a normal position rather than just half-ass two different drills and by trying to combine them.
Yeah. One thing I've done that seems to work is if you stress the system, whatever you have going on will further cement it into your nervous system. So I found this out by really messing myself up. If you have really bad movement and you're all goofed up and you put yourself under high stress, you almost like further embed
Yeah.
those changes into your nervous system. So I'm like, oh, okay, so if that makes me a lot worse, what about if I do a drill and then do a lift? So if I have something that, in my case, right now it's fast lateral shift to the right, and then similar thing, I'll lie down and I'll roll back to my right and back up. Like my range of motion, it's pretty good now, but like when I first started doing those drills, I would gain like almost 4 inches instantly and everything would feel better. It's, oh, I know where the ground is, everything you can see better, etc. But it wouldn't stay real long. And so what I ended up doing is I would drop that into before I would do a lift. So I would do 2 reps of that, check my range of motion. Cool, it's better. Okay, then I would do a lift. I wouldn't worry about trying to put myself in that position during the lift. I would just do the lift. Okay, lift was still good. Great. And then I found by embedding those into the training that those changes then would stick a lot longer. So
Yeah.
now, after having done this for 4 to 5 months, on some days I can go to the gym and get through a whole session without having to do it once. Other days where I'm a little bit more buggered up, I might have to drop it in a little bit here and there, but it's way less frequency. And it feels like my baseline is just that slow process of etching up because I've had better movement. And then I put myself under load under the better movement and then oscillating back and forth.
Yeah, we've used that actually a fair bit. I just, yeah, didn't mention that. But yeah, we do use that one a fair bit as well. Just throwing in some subtle things to balance out the system in between. But usually we'll do more often than that is stressing the visual system. So we
Ah,
might just
cool.
do that. So we might just hit a heavy set because as you Valsalva, like you're going to drive up intracranial pressure. You're going to essentially set off. We call this like the Turk murmur. I don't know if you're familiar. Oh, so Dr. Clark at the University of Cincinnati, who also teaches for Carrick, he published a research paper and it's based around, it's called a Turk murmur. So a
Hmm.
transient exercise related carotid murmur. And for a normal population, you'll hear it go off at around 150 beats per minute. So if you hold the stethoscope up
Oh,
to the
I
carotid
remember him
under,
talking about this now. I
yeah,
gotcha.
so if you hold it up to the carotid, that's when you'll see like or it's when you'll, sorry, that's where you'll hear like that murmur come into play. Now, if people have had a concussion and then there's a bit of autonomic dysregulation, you're going to hear that murmur at a much lower rate. Could be 120, could be 110,
Mm.
just depends upon the severity. And what he found was symptoms didn't resolve until they got back up to that original starting number of whatever it might be. On average, it was around 150 beats per minute. So when you get into these lifts and you start stressing it, doing a Valsalva to brace for a heavy squat, bench day, whatever you're doing for that day, what we'll do is then throw ourselves into a vision drill that requires having some sort of peripheral vision or using the search and scan, or even we can use red green glasses and then
Hmm.
separate out each eye to see if you have eye suppression, meaning like one eye just shuts off.
Mm-hmm.
I had so the rugby player I was evaluating, he very, very high level guy. He was struggling with perception to the right. And what we were doing early on is we were doing breath hold walks. So my buddy Brian Peters, phenomenal breath coach, was putting him through just a little bit of an evaluation thing of seeing how long we can hold our breath and take it into these walks, go until you feel like the walls are closing in on you, all that type of stuff. And then I got thinking in my head, I'm curious. I just want to test him after this and see how he does. So we put him through one of the breath walks, sorry, the breath hold walk. And then immediately after he stopped, got his breath back real quick, we threw the glasses on and his eye shut off. And it's because we were
Mm.
starting to stress him to the point where his brain
Yep.
was having to make a decision. If he doesn't fully trust his right eye, your brain in a do or die situation is just going to say, get rid of that input, only focus on your left eye. So
Yep.
now for him, in between lifts, if he's doing a really heavy lift where there's a lot of Valsalva going on, or we're starting to increase intracranial pressure, the brain's going to go, oh shit, I don't want to, die. Let's shut off whatever extraneous information that's not helping me. So now we just reinforce that by then having him do these drills. Initially, it's just going to be single eye work to develop the strength in the eye to get comfortable around it. And then we can go into red green glasses and really separate out the eyes and start training it up.
Oh, that's super cool. Yeah, that's super awesome. Related to that, I've had this idea that when people are watching film on a certain player, and there's technology to do this, and someone's probably doing it. I don't know who, but their heart rate would be, their biometrics would be displayed on the bottom of the screen, right? So you could see heart rate, maybe you could see HRV, and then you would note, do they make more mistakes at certain heart rate ranges? And if they're always making mistakes at the high end range or heart rate accelerating too fast, like you said, that may give you some clues as to, okay, are they dropping certain information at a certain point? Maybe they're just flat out not conditioned. So everything is this high stress input, which we know is going to start collapsing some peripheral vision, etc. I don't know. I was just thinking if at a
Yeah,
remote
so
thing, that might be something you could look to see and be like, hey, this person doesn't really move like that. They're in the same position. Their heart rates were similar, but this person is always making mistakes to the right side. They're missing the player coming in or whatever.
so I actually test that with a lot of people. We'll get their heart rate up by just putting them on a bike or something else. But like you said, you can track it in game situations too. Dr. Clark actually does that in his lab. So
Oh, yeah, I remember him telling me about that.
they'll strap
He's
on a
like,
heart
yeah,
rate
we stress
monitor.
the crap out of him. It's pretty fun.
Oh, it's brutal to watch. But yeah, it's pretty cool. But no, so yeah, I'd be really curious. I know the NFL has the capability because one of the guys that runs their injury prevention program is a buddy of mine, and they've got some really interesting metrics that they've been tracking, and they got some data that they're going to be rolling out here pretty soon when he publishes his PhD on it. But yeah, so they do have the ability to actually track that stuff. And then so the rugby player that I work with, I can get access to his metrics. So I can see his
Nice.
heart rate in the game, and then we can timestamp it to some of the decision making that's going on. So now we can start to track to see where he's at, looking at even some of the GPS data, like how many high
Yeah,
speed
catapult.
meters has he come? Yeah, like
Yep.
how stressed is he within this? Okay, what's his heart rate in this situation? Looking at all these different things and then looking at the decision making that then branches off of that.
Yeah, because to me, I think that's like the next level. Because it's one of those things where you can see it in some players. And now I think about our Vikings quarterback performance the last two games. It's was not very good to say the least. But people are like, oh, he's just bad. He's not very good. I'm like, you don't win 14 games by being really crappy at your job. You know what I mean? Like you don't in most of those positions, like you just don't get to that level without being pretty damn good.
Yeah.
But when you got more stress, the pockets going around him, my bias, and again, this is just purely guessing, that there's something peripheral that's escalating his nervous system and making him very uncomfortable. And that's just enough at that high level to be off by a couple inches, to be late by like half a second. All those things at that level make a massive difference from a performance that looks amazing to a performance that looks horrible. And you see this, if you take quarterbacks through the NFL, like you'll see why do some games they have are just amazing against a pretty good team, and then the following week it looks horrible. Like it doesn't look any different. But my guess is that there may be some deficiencies in those areas. And then if you add in the fact that they're playing a contact sport where they're literally getting their bell rung how many times a game, and if those poor games are showing up in the playoffs towards the end of the year, I start wondering about concussion and just being hit in the head so many times that, yeah, they're probably not going to fail concussion protocol or anything like that. But it's just enough that's damped down or changed some of those circuits that when they need them the most, they're just not where they were, say, at the beginning of the year where they haven't got hit in the head so many times.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll test that with a lot of the athletes that I work with. We'll go through a full autonomic breakdown, looking at pulse pressure side to side, like within pulse ox and all that stuff, saturation rates. We'll go through optic nerve testing for red eye saturation, to assessing Turk murmur, supine seated standing blood pressure, trying to just assess or table tilt test, like all the autonomic testing to see where they're at, to have a baseline. And then you can track that throughout their season too, which then helps when decision making starts to deteriorate. So the more parasympathetic we can get them, the healthier that autonomic system, yin and yang, are between sympathetic and parasympathetic. I find the better decision making. Like you said, it's when they start getting a few more hits to the head, it's sub threshold, but it's probably enough to swing them a little bit more sympathetic, which is then throwing them faster into that fight or flight than they normally would be. So now the walls are going to close in, their vision's going to, shorten down a little bit. They're not going to think in probabilities where if I throw here, then this defender comes here. All they're just going to see is the receiver and say, okay, let's hit this so then I don't get hit. So the decision making comes down. They become far less cerebral about what they're doing, and it just more becomes a survival based mechanism. So
Yeah.
yeah, I find that a lot. Funny to talk about though, with the tracking the heart rate and everything else and seeing if like decision making breaks down. The UFC actually did that, I think, by accident. I don't even think they realized that they
Mm.
were doing that, because they have the mouthpiece that has the heart rate sensor embedded in it.
Oh, I heard
And they
about
only
that.
used it for that one time. That's as what I've seen. I haven't seen it on any other cards where it's popped up. Uh,
Right.
but you could start to see when guys were breaking down in their fights, and you might have picked up like that at this heart rate or their heart rate recovery between rounds,
Yeah, it's
with
really poor. You'll see
yeah,
that. Even
yeah.
at the high
So
level, you still see that, which is amazing to me.
yeah. So that's super interesting to get into that type of stuff. And then you can start to classify that out. Now I'm super pissed at myself because I had that idea like 6 years ago.
No.
I should have just taken it to the market. So yeah, I'm kicking myself for that now, because I was started to talk to, I think I was talking to some of the sports scientists at Ohio State about that. I'm like, can we get these for my guys and you guys can run a research study on it? And then literally the next night was that UFC, I think they were fighting in the Sphere. And then that's when they rolled out that technology. And I'm just sitting there, son of a bitch. I could have just retired off the millions I would have made on that.
Yeah. Yeah. The first time I saw this, I think was the old, God, the strongman stuff. I think when it was on, was it ABC Worldwide of Sports when they
That
had
was
the polar
awesome.
heart
Yeah.
rate straps? And it was wild to see heart rates hitting 180, 190 on the plane pulls and stuff like that. And it was cool to see that data. And then I remember asking someone, I don't remember who I was asked, David Sandler, somebody. And I said, that was like super cool and like novel. That was done like years and years ago. Like, why did they get rid of it? Because everything now is trying to become more interactive, like NFL, baseball, you're seeing, each pitch speed and you have all this data coming in. And the rumor was he told me that they had too many fans were getting freaked out and thought all these athletes were going to die of a massive coronary that they had to stop displaying all the data. They had so many complaints about it.
Oh man, yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, to see that data when it comes through. Yeah, it's funny. Like we're in an age where we can collect so much data now, and I feel like we've also shied away from it as well. I think it's a good thing as well. I think we got to a point where we were so data driven that it was handcuffing our decision making. We were just
Yeah.
collecting data points for the sake of collecting data points, not doing anything with it. So yeah, yeah, that we lost the art of coaching along the way, I found. But it looks like it's starting to make a little bit of a comeback where people are learning how to actually coach athletes again and not just relying on a data point to drive their whole decision making, which is awesome. But yeah, it's super funny when you get into just the everyday person starting to get interested into these metrics, where we've been tracking this stuff for a while, and then people are just making these really rash decisions now. HRV. Like some people, it's like, oh, my thing's in the red today. Like I shouldn't train at all. And it's only been red for one day.
Right.
But yeah, that stuff always cracks me up.
Yeah. I remember seeing, I went to the Design of Medical Devices conference, which is normally in the Twin Cities here, which is great. So I try to go to that whenever I can. I think this was, God, probably 5 or 6 years ago. There's a mouthguard company that was putting accelerometer strain gauges in the mouthguard to determine head impacts. And I remember talking to them. They're like, yeah, it's pretty accurate. We can get it. It's not noticeable. And it sounds like they had most of all the bugs worked out of it. It was still very new. And I kept following up with them even a couple of years later. And I'm like thinking, oh my God, this is going to be huge, right? Everyone's worried about concussion. We can quantify, we can know all this. And maybe, and hopefully it's changing now. But the feedback I got from them was, yeah, the technology works pretty good. Everything is great. He's the guy, I won't say the name of the company, but I don't think anyone really wants to know what these impacts actually are because then they may be held liable because they actually have data. And I was like, oh crap.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense on the into that regard of things.
I didn't think of that.
No, that's funny. Yeah, that's super interesting on some of that. It's same thing with the Guardian caps that they had the guys wear for the NFL, putting them over top of
Yeah.
the helmets. It was a big thing when it first came out, and now you don't really hear anything about it. And I think if I remember looking at the data, it caused like a 10% reduction in force. But if you're getting hit at something that's 65 G's and then you drop it down to whatever 59 or
Yeah.
it's still a lot of G's going through you or whatever it might be, or the amount of force that's going through something. It's just it does scare the general public around that when they start to find out about that. And then obviously the higher ups in the sport don't want the data to get out because then it's decreasing the likelihood of people playing that sport or even watching that sport.
Yeah. I remember back when I did my master's at mechanical engineering at Michigan Tech. This was back in the mid to late 90s, and there was a guy there doing research on helmets and concussion. And so he was testing out different designs to try to reduce different simulated impacts in the lab. And I was asking him, I said, hey, man, that's pretty cool. Like, you must just get a ton of funding from the NFL. And he's like, nope. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, they don't want to know. I was like, oh. And granted, this is 25 plus years ago, so hopefully it's different now. And I know they have done more testing and better stuff. But it's interesting because at one hand, if you're the NFL, yes, you want to do everything you can to protect players. You want to make it a safe game. Obviously, they've had numerous rule changes to benefit that. But at the same point, I think companies and organizations have been very careful about what data they show the public now. And it tends to be only beneficial performance data. Like how far did the ball go? How fast did it go? Like they're not showing a lot of, oh, this person got hit with these many G's or those types of potentially negative impacts.
The good thing is they are collecting it internally.
Yeah, there's a lot more data now than there ever used to be.
So it's pretty awesome because I've got to see a few of like call them like the player scorecards where they
Yep.
track all these metrics. The less and less is getting out around that. And we always call it like that's a tomorrow problem, not a today
Yeah.
thing for us. It's all that to the fighters all the time. It's like they know the risk, they know what they're getting into. It's just that's a tomorrow problem, not today thing. So we're just trying to mitigate that as much as humanly possible through supplementation or some of the autonomic testing and visual vestibular stuff that we can to help them. But ultimately, there is a price to pay within any type of sport.
If you were to break down just the visual field at a very high level, like how do you think about it for testing? So if someone's listening to this and they're like, yeah, that's cool. Visual testing sounds good. What would be the things you would want them to think about? And do you have maybe like a progression order? Like in my brain, I'm thinking about just simple stuff like tracking first, and then at the end of the line is maybe pencil push-up, stuff like that, binocular versus monocular. Like those things in my experience seem to be more deeply embedded and wound. And if you start really fussing with those, the risk is a lot higher with some of those things. Does that make sense? Like in terms of, okay, look at this because the potential upside is pretty high, but the downside's like small, like in
Yeah.
terms of a progression.
Yeah. So usually say I got a new patient or new athlete coming into the clinic. The first thing I'll test is actually like the autonomic stuff, just because that's going to be an underlying thing for everything else. If their sympathetics are through the roof, then I know their visual stuff is going to suck.
Yep.
So I got to get baseline on that first. And then
Wouldn't that
from
be like the blood pressure differences, standing, seated, left, like the ones you
standing
talked
seated,
about before?
yeah. Yeah, if there's like a change in 20 millimeters mercury in the systolic, like that's a positive for it. Another thing, this is the easiest one I use, or the two easiest ones I use, is the red saturation test. So
Hmm.
you just look at, it could be a towel, a cloth, a shirt, whatever. So you're going to cover one eye, you're going to look at it, and then you're going to switch eyes. So then cover the other eye, look at the same thing. And all I want to know is, does it look the same side to side within each eye? Is the intensity of the red the same side to side, or is it paler one eye versus the other?
Hmm.
If it's paler in one eye, like it's that red isn't popping as much, it's not as intense, then we have reduced blood flow to that optic nerve. So we know there's something autonomic going
Ah.
in there.
I think you
And
found a pretty crazy case study with that, if I remember correct.
yeah, so we got some cool stuff with it. I actually had some, I had a, so he just got out of the military as a paratrooper, had a handful of like long-term concussion issues. And I actually just did that test with him over the phone. I'm like, go grab a t-shirt, stare at it, go switch eye to eye. And sure enough, like we were able to just pin it down based off of that. I'm like, I already know you got a bunch of weird stuff going on. Just based off of that like test alone. But then the other test that I'll use, it's a really easy one, is you'll get someone's blood pressure, so they're systolic and diastolic, and then you'll pump it back. So you'll release the valve, let it bleed out, give them a minute or two, and then you'll pump it back up to that systolic you were just at. And then what I'll have them do is with their other arm, they'll take their hand up to their mouth, blow into it as hard as they can, which is creating that Valsalva. And I'll just you're supposed to go at 10% of whatever their systolic is. So usually it's around like 12 to 15 beats, or 12 to 15 millimeters of mercury, which is usually just like one squeeze of the sigmometer. And you're listening to see, can you still hear the pulse pressure going against the stethoscope?
Hmm.
If And they're just doing that breath like exhale for 3 seconds really hard into their fist. If you can't hear, if you go like you're hearing the systolic initially, you give the squeeze, they blow into it, and you don't hear anything, then that's a massive issue, because it means that they don't have the ability to properly regulate blood flow to the brain, so they'll just cut it out.
So they're just occluding right away.
Yeah, so they'll occlude the area
Ah.
to not get turbulent blood flow up to the brain. So you'll also see
Ah.
the decreased Turk murmur with that as well. So what normally should happen is you should be able to hear their pulse pressure, and like this within the stethoscope when you're taking their blood pressure, even when they blow into it really hard. And then when they let go, it'll fade away, and then it should take about roughly 30 seconds to come back. Now, if
That's
they're
pretty cool. I haven't used that one at all. I like that.
yeah, if they're concussed or they have autonomic issues and they blow into it, you won't hear anything. It'll just
Because
be
they're
right.
basically just occluding right away to save blood flow.
Yep. So that's the two easiest autonomic tests that I use. And then in from there, we'll start to just do some like real simple stuff of like smooth pursuits, like just checking in each direction. Then I'll switch it to single eye smooth pursuits. From there, we'll do saccades.
You
And
want to
then
explain what a saccade is for
yeah,
people
so
who may
saccade
not
is
know?
just bouncing from side to side. So like a smooth pursuit would is if you just followed someone's finger like across, if they moved it from left to right or up and down, and they just moved it at a really slow, easy rate. A saccade would be like if they stuck out one thumb to the left, one thumb to the right, and then you had to switch from like staring at one thumb to the other. So you would just bounce your eyes back and forth, like they'd be darting side to side or up and down. I also look to see if that's a trigger for visual, like for symptoms, if they get headaches, dizziness, whatever. Because that again can link back into some of the autonomic or ocular motor dysfunctions. So the eye. So I'll use that one. We'll then break out into, we'll test convergence, but not like actually testing convergence. I'm just going to bring my finger in to see if their eyes, both eyes come in or not, and what they do. And then same thing, I'll switch it single, and then we'll go one eye, same thing, tracking in, all that stuff. I'm not measuring it at that point. I'm literally just looking to see if the eyes can move in or not.
Yeah.
And then from there, I'll
Because
check
it's
for,
wild. You will see some people where, okay, do the test, and one eye's out here still, and then here's
yeah,
all the way in. I'm like,
yeah. So at that point, I'm like, I don't even have to test their convergence stuff because I already know they're going to get in. From there, we'll start to go into peripheral testing. And then you can get into checking it with colors as well. So I might just bring like a colored post-it note around the side of their head, but you have to make sure that they're staring at the wall in front of you. So it helps if you have somebody like standing in front of them who's staring at their eyes, because then they're
watching
not,
them. Yeah.
yeah.
So they don't cheat.
So we'll just bring the post-it note around the side of the head and kind of score where they're at, and then we'll change the colors. So I'll ask them like, let me know when you see something, and then ask them, can you tell me what color it is? If they can't tell me the color, then we just slowly keep bringing it forward until they can see the color. So just because they can see something doesn't necessarily they're going to have the the wherewithal to know exactly what that color is. And you might see some changes around it too. Like some colors are easier to pick up on the periphery than others. Because then that honestly relates back into the sport as well.
Yep.
If I'm a quarterback and I'm not picking up the color green and I'm playing against a team that's wearing green, you can bet there's probably going to be more sacks and interceptions that game.
Yep.
So we'll test that. Another thing that we'll do is like Bates field splitters, which is literally just taking like post-it notes that are two different colors and holding it up at the bridge of your nose and staring forward and see, do you see both colors or do you just see one? Because then that
Hmm.
helps with eye suppression. So if I'm only seeing the one color, I know I'm shutting the
Ah,
eye.
yeah, yeah.
So that's another easy thing as well. The other thing that I'll use within that is trying to think for suppression. You can use those like different colored glasses, like the red green glasses, checking for single eye suppression as well. And then we'll go through like that search and scan, like piece of paper, timing them, see how they function out, because that's a little bit more taxing on the eyes. And then from there, we'll start testing convergence. So you can do that on a Brock string, which is just like a bunch of beads along a string and seeing, do they make an X? Do they make a Y? Is it just one string? And it tells me how your eyes are converging on the area.
Which is
I
more of a prerequisite for 3D versus monovision, correct?
Yeah.
Is what you're looking at there.
Yeah, pretty much. You can Lang test people too, which is just seeing if they can see with both eyes or if it's just one eye. And then to really ramp it up, then I have a computer program that I'll run where that'll take them through convergence, divergence, and I'll measure it in diopters. And then we can record the time at which like they're doing their saccades at, and then also doing it from like base in and base down. So essentially, like when you deal with prisms, so that's what base in, base down, or base up, base down, base in, base out is. So essentially, it's like looking through a prism lens. So say if you're looking at base, like essentially the light is going to deflect to the left. So if I'm looking through a base right thing, my eyes actually have to shift to the left to pick this thing up. So you're always going in the opposite direction. And that's really hard for the brain because it's really tricky. I don't know if anyone's ever had to deal with prism lenses, but it's a really odd feeling because they're
It's
super
weird.
thick on one side and really thin on the other. So it's like forcing your brain to have to switch it on the fly.
Yeah, I had prism glasses for quite a while to fix some of the stuff I had going on. And when I first got into this stuff, like the behavioral optometrist stuck a 10-degree prism on my eye, and it was still not even enough to fix it.
That's crazy.
And he's just, I don't know what to do with you. I'm like, the prisms don't work. I'm like, okay. He's like, hey, we could try a bunch of stuff. It's going to be 20 to 30 minutes a day for a couple of years. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like I was under no illusion that it's going to be like an easy fix. And I was
Yeah.
arguing with him and he's like, you're not going to do that. I said, if it's helpful, I'll do it. And then he's like, you're not actually going to do it. And so I ended up leaving his office since he didn't want to try anything else.
It cracks me up.
And I'm like thinking, and the next guy I go to sits me in front of the computer program that's looking at monocular, binocular, doing all the prism stuff. Same thing. And by this one, I had played around with the Brock string and just started figuring out, yeah, I'll try a bunch of stuff on my own. If I melt myself, it's my own problem. Not that I would do this on other people. And I realized midline scar, if I moved my scar to the left and held it there on a Brock string, my right eye would stay, air quotes, on for another 10 to 15 seconds. The second I would let off pressure, like that eye would just completely shut off. And so I'm leaving his office and I said, yeah, if I do a Brock string and I push my scar to the left, my right eye will stay on for additional 10 seconds. I said, is that helpful? And he looks at me and he's like, I think we're done now. I'm like, okay, this is not the dude.
Oh man, I've ran into so many doctors like that. Like I love the people that live on the fringe because I'm in the same thing. I'm always trying to find the next cool thing or to deal with just some off the wall stuff because most of the cases I get in the clinic are very off the wall. I think it's
Oh,
all
I'm sure.
stuff
You see all
that
the crazy stuff.
yeah, like it's all just super odd things that people have had. So you have to get really good at the fringe stuff because they've already tried all the conventional things.
Hmm.
And then that's where you have to start majoring in the minors. But I also find like it just helps the athletes too. Like, because if you can fix up some weird stuff onto that, you can definitely figure out simpler things.
Yeah. And I've also realized maybe you've seen this too. Like the clinicians I've worked with in person or know pretty well, they don't really think in algorithms. They know the algorithms, like they know the progressions you should go through. Like so when I see Dr. Jeremy Schmo here in the Twin Cities, I've been seeing him for many years, does awesome work. You can tell, and I've asked him about this. I just know that if you're missing, this is not there. This is a part of the brain we want to work on. I know this thing works on that part of the brain, so I'm going to try this drill and see if your body likes it or not.
Yeah.
It's not an algorithm of, I didn't see this, so I definitely need to do this and then do this and do this. And you look at, I've talked to Dr. Carrick about this too, and he doesn't think in algorithms. He just thinks in, okay, this part is missing. I know this thing does this, so I'm going to try this. If that doesn't work, that's going to tell me to go this direction, that direction. It's not a tree, but it's interesting to go to a lot of the trainings where people are like, what's the algorithm? And
Yeah.
yes, that's helpful and that's a good start, but you also have to understand that if you're working with more difficult cases, they're not going to follow the algorithm. And a lot of those clinicians then just throw their hands up and get stuck and they're like, you don't follow the algorithm. And it's like, to the patient, they're like, okay, I don't know what you're even talking about. Like, just figure the shit out.
Exactly. Yeah, it really just comes down to pattern recognition. If you see
Yeah.
enough crazy cases, you can start to piece things together and have really good pattern recognition. And honestly, I find that's a common trait amongst like elite level performers, whether you're in the business realm, medical,
Yes.
sports, it's all pattern recognition. The person who can recognize the pattern the fastest can get to the answer the fastest. And it no longer becomes like an algorithm, like you said, where if this, then that, which is just, I call it just giving me the what do I do, rather than knowing the why. If you know the what, you only know the next step. If you know the why, 10,000 steps. And then
Mm-hmm.
from there, it's just thinking in like probabilities and then trying to forecast out. So, like second, third order thinking. If I do this, then this will happen, which will then affect that. But then if this goes wrong, then it can also affect this and that. So then you start to create probabilities in your head where if I do this, it's a pretty good success rate. But if it gets fucked up, then I also need to prepare this person and let them know that could be a potential outcome as well. And I think that's where the real skill of things comes in, where you can start thinking in not just first order, but second and third order thinking, looking down the line of things, because then it makes it easier to string along the rehab process.
Yeah. And I think about the same thing with even hands-on work. And this has probably happened to you too, where you're working on someone. I remember one particular case for an hour and a half, and I'm like, okay, making progress. Okay, this is good. This is better. But you still get that sort of that gut sensation of I'm still missing something. And in her case, the second I did a technique on her right VMO, just massive traumatic release, just crying for 15, 20 minutes, which, at some points will happen if you do enough of that work. But after that, it was like the first night in 2.5 years, she actually slept for an hour without pain. But it was all that kind of lead up to just that one thing was enough to get them over the mountaintop, and they just fall down to the resolution then at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that snowball effect. Like I
Yeah.
always with the chronic pain patients, like it just sucks for you guys because your snowball's starting at the bottom of the mountain rather
Right.
than on top. So you got to push it up the hill, which is a pain in the ass. But once you get up there, it's smooth sailing all the way down. But yeah, it's just doing a bunch of stuff until you get to that one little thing that makes the massive difference. And you do it very well, just letting people know ahead of time, like we're going to have to do some of
Yeah.
these things. And then once you get to that point, it's like smooth sailing from there, but it's going to be a process to get to that point. And it's the people that actually buy in and trust within that process and do the actual work, like they get the result.
Yeah, in the process, a lot of times, if I just use the example of, and I got this from Tom Myers too, of hands-on work, it looks messy and disjointed, and someone from the outside may look and just be like, "What are you doing? You're stressing the shit out of this poor person." But I think that's the difference between someone who does it better versus worse. They get to some type of resolution, and you see a result of that session or that group of training block or that vestibular work or whatever it is, where if someone doesn't have that same skill set, it just looks like a mess the whole time. Like they never quite see these kind of smaller resolutions along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty common thing I find too. Like when I was working at another clinic when I first started out, the clinician that was like working over top of me would look at me and be like, "What the hell are you doing this for?" It was like this doesn't make sense. Like, why are you treating the foot for a low back issue? And it's
Yeah.
you just have to kind of branch down that thing. And the other thing is it's just pushing people hard enough, like giving them the proper stimulus. So I find a lot of things are just underdosed. And then you just create this massive gap. So when you go back to return to play or whatever it is in your daily life, and you still have that gap, like there's a greater chance of re-injury. So I always tell my athletes, your rehab is going to be like the story of Icarus. Like we're going to fly as close to the sun as humanly possible, but try not to get burnt. That's my job, is to make sure I stand between you and the sun. As long as you trust me to let you push you too hard to your breaking point, like you're going to get better much faster. And that's why like the people I work with, they're months ahead of rehab schedule. Like I did a ACL rehab and we were jogging at the end of the second month, and this kid is pretty much good to go, full testing numbers, everything else by month 6.
Wow, nice.
Surgeon cleared him and everything. Like we went through all the steps and all the
Yep.
testing, isokinetics, and he was just smoking the numbers, felt fully confident on it. But again, it's you got to push people to that point. And like people just get freaked out about pushing that hard after an injury. But if you put them in the right drill, they're going to be safe.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. Like, and that's why I love using heart rate variability, which would be a whole nother podcast of, to me, that's a nice way of getting information from their physiology as an output, at least on the autonomic nervous system level of, do we give you enough dose? Oh, we went too far. Okay. Ooh, man, you're red for 2 days. Okay, sorry, my bad. I'm gonna back off now before we fly completely dead center into the sun and burn the whole thing up.
Yeah, it's a bit of a feeling out process, but yeah, that's where the HRV makes it a hell of a lot simpler. But yeah, I always tell people the first week's gonna suck working with me because you're gonna get pushed to the point where you're almost gonna fly directly into the sun, and then we'll pull you back because I want you to know what it's like to actually work hard. And I think that's another thing too, is people are just afraid of the hard work to get to that point. But once they get through that, then they realize, oh, this isn't, it almost becomes a mental thing. Oh, if I can actually get through this, then the rest of it's a breeze. I'm actually not as bad of a shape as I thought I was in.
Yeah, and just learning where that limit is. Like I do that with programming now, with assuming people don't have a lot of heavy issues or stuff they're working on. If they're generally, pretty healthy, just mostly performance, they've got a few things we're working on. I just ramp volume. Hey, week 1, 2 sets, week 2, 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets, and I'm looking until your HRV goes off a cliff, your performance starts dropping, and you send me 3 emails about how much you hate me. Then we're like, probably found your limit, and then we'll back you off. We'll start over with another session, and we're going to try to wave you over a couple of weeks back to that point, and then back down. And then over time, these waves are just going to be increasing over the course of time.
Yeah, it's like what we were talking about before we started recording. For certain demographics, it's pulling them away from it, and other
Oh,
ones
yeah.
swim into it.
Yeah, and with the high level athletes, it's just okay, let's start at 2 sets. And they're like, you're an idiot. Why did I hire you? This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. I'm like, I can almost guarantee you're massively overreached right now and you have no idea. And if I just start adding more volume to you, I don't want to be the one responsible for pushing you over the edge. And I also want you to realize like there is a path to this. And then, oh, wow, your numbers week 2 are like way better than they've ever been. Shocker. And then they realize, oh, okay. Yeah. In hindsight. Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I was talking with one of my fighters yesterday, and he was talking with a former UFC fighter, and he's been going over there and getting some training in, and he told the guys, "Hey, I'm starting to feel a little bit run down." And the former UFC guy, he's an old school guy, so he goes, "Well, you're not training right unless you get sick during camp." And then my fighter came back and told me that, and I said, "Yeah, that's not the case. We're not going to get you sick doing that."
Yeah. Yeah. Where can people find out more about you? I know you've got an in-person clinic. I know you do some online work. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a ghost. Not too many people know, but yeah, my website is www.inferno-pr.com. I would say the easiest way to reach me, honestly, is probably my Instagram DMs because I'm usually just posting stupid shit on my Instagram stories. So you can find me there. I think I'm Dylan underscore Seeley DC. So DYLAN underscore SELEY DC. I think, yeah, that'll probably be like the easiest place that you can find me. But yeah, those 2 spots. I don't put out content often, but I'll put out a lot of stories. And I'm always open to chatting in the DMs. I always just talk to people about random stuff in the Instagram DMs. And then, but if you have like more of a long format thing or you want to hop on like a call or anything like that, they can send me an email to, I think it's Dr. Dylan, DYLAN at inferno-pr.com.
Nice. And tell us about where your in-person clinic is if people are in your area.
Yeah, so I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Like more specifically, I'm out in like more of a rural suburb of Pickerington. So I work in the office there, but I travel all around because I do a lot of concierge work as well. So I'll travel to people and treat them. And then I do a lot of online work or some hybrid stuff where people might come in for a session or two, and then the rest is just remote. Pretty easy to access through all that stuff too. So handle a lot of remote stuff. And then I've got people from all over. I've got athletes in New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, you name it. I'm all over the place now.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely recommend your stuff. And I would definitely say if you're even remotely close to the area, get in an in-person session if you can. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff you can help with online, which is amazing. But I think getting someone who's a really good clinician in person is a very high value for what you'll pay. So if you're anywhere close to that area or you want to fly in, like, I would definitely recommend that. It's definitely worth it. So thank you so much for all your time. Really appreciate it, man.
Of course, appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Really appreciate it. Big thanks to Dr. Dylan. As always, I always learn wonderful stuff from him. It was great to chat. As always, hopefully I'll be seeing him again soon in Vegas. I know he had a good time at the Neurosports conference, which unfortunately I wasn't able to make it there this year. I've gone to the conference in the past. It's been really good. So check out all of our sponsors below. Thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Check out all Dylan's wonderful stuff. We'll talk to all of you next week. See ya.
Hey, what are you doing? I dropped my gum. Hey, lady, would you toss my gum up? You could have taken it out of the wig first.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. The podcast is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should not use the information on the podcast for diagnosing or treating a health problem or disease or prescribing any medication or other treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider before taking any medication or nutritional supplement, and with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this or any other podcast. Reliance on the podcast is solely at your own risk. Information provided on the podcast does not create a doctor-patient relationship between you and any of the health professionals affiliated with our podcast. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to therein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.